Thank you, Adira, and thank you to all of my colleagues at the Hunter for creating such an incredible installation of the show. This is now the fourth venue for Really Free, the Radical Art of Nellie Mae Rowe, a show that we opened at the High Museum of Art in August of 2021. And it's wonderful to see it kind of blossom and take shape in different galleries and different contexts across the country. And as Adira mentioned, I'm joined today by some really esteemed guests, friends, descendants, relatives of the incredible Nellie Mae Rowe, who did not have any children herself, but had a very big family and celebrated all of her nieces and nephews and grandnieces and nephews and great-grandnieces and nephews. And so we have here Ken Brown, Cathi Perry, and Cheryl Mashack. And they're going to be sharing memories throughout the exhibition of their incredible relative. And I'm actually going to hand it over now to Cheryl to kick us off because Cheryl's an artist. She got the art gene for sure, an incredible poet, and she's going to share some of her art with us kind of at the beginning and the ending of this tour. So may I pass this to you?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's a wonderful day. Lovely Chattanooga, Tennessee here. Okay. I want to share something that I have, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it too. Okay, can you hold that for me? I just want this piece, just this page is fine. It is called Broken Crayons, Still Color. Did you know that broken crayons still color? Packaged neatly in a small box, waiting to be used. Vibrant and vivid colors shout out loud like a voice filled with the Holy Ghost, colors tickling your eyes with pleasing shades that captured your attention with a paralytic gaze. A rainbow of colors, red and yellow, black and white, some broken, abused, and misused. But they are precious in His sight because broken crayons still color. 123 years ago, a little black girl was born to this world on July 4th with a purpose she knew not of. Not knowing God's plan, she journeyed through this land with visions of colors and shapes dancing about her head like an African drummer's circle, entrancing her with a mesmerizing beat. Tapping to the beat of her own drum, yet dancing to another she did not create. Why? Because her crayons were broken. Broken with the vicissitudes of life, broken because of inequality and misogyny, broken because of injustices and travesties, but yet the crayons were coloring and screaming out loud, I want to be free to be me, to color the world with love and peace, and imagine that that world could see what I see. Colorism lifted its ugly head and it painted a portrait in time, radically dividing shades and hues that we see, exasperating our energy in these exercises of futility and stupidity. Because of the stigma that was imposed upon us on what we should look like and what we should be. And yet again, this deep-toned melanated woman painting with broken crayons that colored her world with disparity and prohibited her from her full authority, while onlookers witnessed a phoenix, if you please, rising from fiery ashes as she spread her sooted wings and colored her world with innate wisdom and her God-given ability. Fragmented colors with a panoramic view, a child with a dream of an artist she'd be. However, picking cotton and peas was her feat. But she colored through. Joined in holy matrimony twice at a young age, bearing no children to others God gave. The shades were dim, but she colored through. Racial riots, civil rights, murdered children, economic inequalities, all within her view. But somehow, she managed to color through. Steeped in faith, she handled adversities with amazing grace, broken crayons coloring in and out of the lines, but she took part with a loving heart, allowing strangers into her space, where she created a peaceful place that harmonized with all of the colors that flow from her soul. A legacy she has made with the colors she has laid, with broken crayons that still color. Broken crayons, many are we, living in a world that needs love and peace. An example has been made. God set her free, and just as she, freedom you will find if you just keep coloring outside of the lines. Did you know that broken crayons still color? Thank you.
Whew. All right. That was some good stuff, Cheryl. Cheryl, you're amazing. I mean, gorgeous art in and of itself, your poetry, but also like the best introduction possible to Nellie Mae Rowe. There were so many things that I hope you all caught. That was really the story of her life. And in this opening gallery, we tried to put pieces that were really autobiographical and kind of bear out that story through what she was drawing. This is a piece called Making It to Church Barefoot, which when she talked about her childhood growing up in Fayetteville, which is a town that's about an hour south of Atlanta and was really rural at that time. She lived within walking distance to a really historic African Methodist church and walked there for school and for Sunday services and church school. And her mom always made sure that she and her sisters were dressed beautifully and had wonderful shoes, but they were really uncomfortable. So she would take them off and be barefoot, often on this journey. So that's why there are those kind of big feet stepping among kind of rats, scurrying along the grounds. There's lots of rats in her memories of her childhood. But just this beautiful, vibrant depiction of the stained glass windows of this church, which still exists. You can still visit it, and that's where she's buried with so many members of your family. A beautiful, beautiful historic graveyard there. And then we move into this kind of seminal moment in her life, which is after she leaves Fayetteville. She moves around 1930 to Vinings, which is a kind of urbanizing area northwest of Atlanta. And she moves there with her first husband, who dies pretty not long after they move there. And he dies in a workplace accident, and she remarries within a year. And by that point, she's already kind of taken up domestic work, which is something that she continues to do for most of her adult life. She's cleaning other people's houses. She's cleaning the houses of white families that live in Vinings. Vinings was never a predominantly black area. It was always a kind of wealthier white area that had these little pockets of black communities that were often working in these kind of service roles. And so she had one of those roles. She worked for one family for like 30 years. And her second husband dies in 1948. He was much older than her. And then in 1968, the wife of the family she was working for was already dead, and the husband starts to become very ill, and he's dead by early 1969. And that's when she becomes an artist. And so this says, my house is clean enough to be healthy and dirty enough to be happy. And so this is a big thing about this show, was trying to put her in this black feminist context of what it meant for her at this point in her life to say, I'm only going to care for myself. I'm tired of caring for other people. I'm tired of being a wife. I've done that twice. I'm not remarrying. And I'm finally don't have to work anymore for these other families. And so she made this kind of declaration of independence, right? And that's actually really what the show's about. It's called Really Free, The Radical Art of Nellie Mae Rowe. Cheryl, where did you go? Are you standing back there? I mean, your broken crowns metaphor is so beautiful, because one thing that we learned when we were working on this show at the High was that she was using crayon. That was her pigment of choice on almost all of her drawings. So we used to say, like in our these are all almost drawings from the High's. Well, no, all of these are drawings from the High's collection. And we would say about them, you know, they have colored pencil, they have maybe some watercolor, sometimes some gouache. But the more that our conservators looked at them, the more that we realized this is crayon. Like, this is crayon done in different ways. And it's crayon that she would sharpen super sharp to make those little fine lines. And it's crayon that she would press deeply, you know, into the paper to get those beautiful layers of that waxy kind of color. So she was using crayon, and so that's why your broken crayons is so great, because it really just like empowers that choice that she made, even when she would later get access to other art materials that she could have chosen from. But in this case, so what we're used to seeing with her work are these vibrant, you know, just absolutely gorgeous, full, almost no white space ever, right? Compositions of color and line and all kinds of activity happening within them. But when I was curating the show, it was this work that totally stood apart from all of that, that kind of like, you know, it still makes my heart kind of skip a beat when I see it, right? Because it's not that, right? It's just this little quiet work. And what she's done is she's taken this little frontispiece from a pamphlet that she got that was released by the Bible Society in 1967. It was a reprint of the Gospel according to St. John called Really Free. And she took it, she tore it out, and she wrote her name in this way that it completely envelops this phrase, really free. And to me, that was just like, had to be the name of the show. It had to be the graphic of, you know, the title where we tried to bring out her, the way that she signed her name, because it's just such a statement of, for again, someone who, as Cheryl shared with you and as our first section text explains, she said, I am born on the 4th of July. There are different records in the US Census about when she may have been born. We don't have a birth certificate for her, but it doesn't really matter because that was her origin, right? Like, that's how she told her story, was that she was born on the 4th of July. And that and this all tells you something about this person who, as Cheryl's poem told you, went through all of these vicissitudes of life, was held back in so many ways, and she still found a way when she was around 68 years old to claim this freedom and to liberate herself with art. And so I have to now turn it over to you all to talk a little bit about what the signature meant to her and how you all practice as kids.
Okay, well, all of us as kids growing up would think Nellie knew about the signature and the hand. Composition paper, any kind of paper, you draw this hand, you've got to fill it in with the nails, the rings, the whole bit, and
You want to go show them over here?
yeah, and sign her name. So as you can see here, we have the hand. It's filled in with the jewelry and whatever else you wanted to add to that. And then, of course, you've got the Nellie Mae Rowe, which was her name, and we had to practice that. She would write it, then she'd tell us to write it. And then, of course, when she finished, she said, but of course, you know, mine is better. I mean, even as a kid, you didn't get any coupons to say, okay, whatever. But the hand, I can remember that throughout my life with her is the hands, because there was the exhibit for 99 and a half won't do. And it was about the hand. It was always about the hand, I guess signifying what these hands had been through and were capable of going through. So that's pretty much my take on the hand.
Did you want to add anything? I'm going to set you up with some playhouse stuff.
I don't have a hand story. I got a lot of others, but no hands.
So the hand too, she would talk about how her drawing was an act of praise, right? Like, that's how she spoke about her gifts. She felt God didn't give her children, but God gave her this gift of being an artist. And she would talk about drawing as this kind of act of prayer, act of praise. And so in a lot of her works, there's some other great handworks in these galleries as you walk through, including one over there that has her hand raised. And this one is white, but in that one, she's colored it in with beautiful black pigment. And she says, you know, God is not dead. And so her hand was also this kind of symbol of this connection that she had to spirituality. And I have to stop and say the amazing, if you have to go see the Beaufort Delaney and Joseph Delaney show over there, because I was just reading the text, And they began drawing on church cards, on little cards sitting in pews at church. And then they were formally trained. They trained with really esteemed artists, where she never got to go to art school. But just to say that connection to church, to spirituality, and to artistic practice is something that's really connecting these two shows. Also that Beaufort Delaney was born basically the same time as her, so they were really peers. So she drew in different ways, like from different inspirations, and she did something that the surrealists, called automatic drawing, where you kind of just follow the line of the pen that you're using. And I love this drawing, always makes me really see that, because it's like one of these big crazy drawings but broken down. And you could see how she was kind of playing, and there was a tree, but then there was this animal, and then the animal kind of connected to another tree, and how those lines all start to kind of morph into different kinds of objects and relationships. And then in this one, she called this one, or had described it at one point as talking about at night things come to me, like she's lying in her bed. Green was something that she depicted herself in a lot. Whenever you see someone in green, it's her. She had this great green dress that she made for herself. She was a seamstress as well, that she wore in a lot of photographs. And so here she is lying in her bed, and all of these thoughts are coming to her, and some of them are recognizable animals, but they're all a little strange. This black dog has wings. This is like a woman, green dog head. So, that kind of subconscious inspiration. And then this is a piece that I love. We're starting to get into this section about her playhouse, because what happens to her in the late 1960s is not just that she's starting to draw again, it's that she's really decorating in this exuberant way her entire home that she'd built with her second husband. You could see a photograph of it over there. And she lived on a really busy road in Vinings that people, drove on, especially as Atlanta got increasingly urban and Vinings basically became part of the city. There were cars just passing her house, at every hour of the day. And so she was doing this in a way that was extremely brave and courageous, which is another reason why I see her art as being very much a part of the Black feminist movement that was happening in that era, even if she wasn't, reading people like Audre Lorde and Alice Walker, and she was aware of people like Shirley Chisholm, like people who were coming into the kind of national scene at that moment to really raise up the kind of potential of Black women and talk about the issues that they faced uniquely. So all to say that she was doing all of this in a way that was like very courageous for a woman who was living alone in the 1960s, a Black woman who was living alone in the 1960s on a busy road, right? And this is definitely an era, Atlanta gets so much credit for being the cradle of the civil rights movement and being so different than so many other southern cities, but there was so much violence. Still is. And so this was something that she had to really have the courage to do. And in this piece, she says, there's text embedded, and that's something she did in a lot of her drawings. It says, if you want to be seen, stand up. If you want to be heard, shut up. If you want to be heard, speak up. And if you want to be appreciated, shut up. Do any of you recognize that? It was, and I think it was popularized by Bill Cosby, and certainly was like a thing that was said that she liked that. She liked taking things like that. My house is clean enough to be dirty. I know it's clean enough to be healthy and dirty enough to be happy. That was from a little napkin that she collected, a little souvenir napkin. So she liked taking the phrases that stuck out to her and pay homage to them in her drawings. But Ken, do you want to talk about the Playhouse a little bit and what a special place it was to visit? Yeah.
Good afternoon. Special place for me. It was very magical. It's hard for me to talk about my Aunt Nellie without talking about her sister, because we're all connected that way. I can remember as a small child, her sister coming grabbing us, and meaning us, my siblings, and we would walk over, and talking about Vinings at the time, it was very untapped. So the walk over was just as magical for me. You got to think as a 4-year-old kid how your imagination will work as you walk. And it was really a build-up getting to her home. It was so special to me because a 4 or 5-year-old kid, any toy I wanted was in a tree or on a table or somewhere. and it was easy to grab, and she loved you. She anything you wanted. I was talking about her earlier. She's one of the 3 people in my life that ever I was around her, I always felt safe. There was never a threat. Fast forward to the day with her being by herself, that had to be really interesting for her. But back to my childhood. The yard was laden with flowers, rose bushes along the fence. Don't know the name of the puffy blue, look like snowballs. Thank you. Yeah. that lined the yard as well. It was such a magical place. Food, she's making food for us, sandwiches. It was always a loving place, peaceful. I like to use the word zenful now that I understand what it was really about. No matter what was going on around the world, and my relationship with her at the Playhouse, she knew me. She knew me. She knew what was going on in my life. Even as I grew into manhood, I'm a teenager. I'm playing football, and she says, me and my sister was there on a Saturday afternoon, and she says to me, she says, this is how the conversation went. She goes, what do you children do with your chewing gum after you finish with it? You throw it away, don't you? Yeah, Nellie, that's the program. She says, not me. I put mine in this can, and then I put it in the freezer, and when I get enough of it, I'll pound it out, and I'll make a statue. And me and my sister looked at each other. And then she says, you play football, don't you? I said, yeah, Nellie. She said, I'm going to make a statue of you kicking a football. Never got that statue. I wish that I had. But it wasn't those were not the things that I took from Aunt Nellie. I took the ability to be an individual from Aunt Nellie. Aunt Nellie was rocking and rolling and far, far ahead of her time before many other people. She was doing Aunt Nellie. I'm so grateful that I have that part of her running through me. I do not have any artistic abilities. I can't rap like my cousin Cheryl. But what I do, and just like my cousin Cheryl and the rest of us, we took from Aunt Nellie the ability to be us. And it's not what other people think about you, it's what you think about yourself. So I was very fortunate to be attached to that because, believe it or not, I don't think a lot of people understand that concept. And maybe it was being exposed to her that I was able to get that. And it was the days and nights at the Playhouse watching wrestling or whatever we were doing to wait for Mom and Dad to come pick us up. She babysitted us from time to time. So my journey with her was extremely magical. I'm very fortunate to be a part of this journey. It's magical. Thank you, Cathi, for everything you do for us, and thank you all for coming out. So thank you.
So your mother was,
My dad was her
your dad was her nephew, okay. And did you want to share anything about her? I know, okay, yeah, we don't want to put you on the spot. We didn't. But did you all want to share anything about her persona? Because that's like something that, as someone who never met her, it's so clear in her art, you know, all of what Ken just said about how she was just one of those people who like defied the odds and was happy to walk to the beat of her own drum.
Katie,
Yeah.
this is Julian. He grew up as a kid
Oh my goodness.
with Aunt Nellie. His mom was the trio to the Aunt Nellie and Judith. So,
Okay, so we have a new friend who I've never met before,
Yes.
Julian,
Yes, I know.
but who has some personal experiences
Yes.
that he's willing to share as well. Is that okay? Okay.
Well, I just met Nellie's family, but my mom's from Italy, so she's an Italian immigrant female in the 70s in Atlanta. Unlike Ken, I'm Italian, so I cry all the time.
That's okay. That's you.
Yeah. So, time I was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I was always with Nellie Mae and my mom and Judith. And even today, looking at her from work and being a little boy, and they would give me paper and markers. I can see how the colors I was choosing, they were mimicking, her colors. And I can remember, as you guys were bringing up the hand, I can remember her having me, trace a hand. So, really, really, really fortunate to have crossed paths with Nellie Mae. She actually painted a painting for my mother. So my mother had an original Nellie Mae in her house, and it's Nellie Mae's portrait of my mother, and it's special. My mom was here about a month ago to see the show, and when she walked out, she just leaned against the metal railing and just cried, and just said how special the support of Nellie Mae and Judith were, being a single immigrant woman in the 70s in Atlanta. She said she would be good to talk to because my mom can remember a lot, but I was a little boy. But she said, the first time that Nellie Mae went to New York, all these reporters and stuff, and people taking pictures, and someone, seemed so ignorant the way they asked this of her. But, hey, what's it like to get to be in New York with all these big people or whatever, something like that. And Nellie just said, people's people, honey. people's people, honey. And, so those kinds of things. So it's really special to get to meet some of her family and to be here. And I live in Chattanooga, so it's just really special to for the show to be here. So, thank you.
Yes. Hi, I'm Walter Thorne, and I remember the Playhouse in Nellie so often because my route to, we had a convenience store back then called Pot of Gold. My route to Pot of Gold was past her house and on the way back to stop to warm up because it was cold outside. And she asked me to go downstairs and get a coal for her. She had this big stove, wood-burning stove.
It's right in there. See with that teapot on top?
Okay.
Yeah.
And she just kept
It's a
that
scary
thing just
stove.
blazing hot
Yes.
and warm. And I mean, but one of my favorite things she had in the yard was a plum tree. She had a plum. Man, I used to love those plums. I used to go
Purple.
by and snag a couple of them. She said, yeah, get all you want. But once she asked me when I was going to spend the night with her. And I, it went over a year. And one time I said, yes, I will. And I went down and she said, I'm not a cook, but she did cook spam sandwich. She's
a sandwich maker.
It was really good. And I stayed over and just didn't realize what environment I was in at that time with her. But it was just so magical and it was amazing how she, you seen her all the time. She, always humming and playing her little keyboard, 99 and a half won't do, and just, it was just amazing when we would stop by, and I think she had love for everyone. I just see her at our church at the time. She would come, for a funeral or whatever, people, we had funerals back there, and she was just, just amazing. I mean, it really does my heart well to see what's going on today. That's what's so amazing, how God has used her. We look at little things and say, oh man, that don't look like it. But there's another eye, and God have already put it in plan for what should happen. So this day has already been ordered. Her step was already ordered, already ordained. So thank you guys for coming out. And thank you for what all you do.
Thank you.
You, Kathy, Cheryl, Ken, love you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're standing now in front of a video that shows you a recreation of her playhouse that was done for a documentary, an experimental hybrid documentary, really, that just internationally debuted at South by Southwest, which for those of you who know, it's like a big, important film festival, among other things. And it's a feature-length documentary that really traces both the life and art of Nellie Mae Rowe, but also the contours of her journey and how it eventually intertwined with Judith Alexander, an art dealer in Atlanta who was really a pioneering gallerist supporting contemporary artists, but then developed this really close friendship with Nellie Mae Rowe that really kind of went on to define her life. She never really had a relationship with an artist like Nellie and never would again. And so the documentary is about their lives together in a lot of ways too, and the interesting ways that a black life and a white life in this era of Georgia have all of these points of contact before they ever really meet. And it's a fascinating, beautiful film that includes animated sequences inside of the playhouse. So they recreated her playhouse from the kinds of materials that she used, right? So like masking tape, cardboard, these are replicas of her chewing gum sculptures. They use things that Nellie would have used in her own art to recreate these little models of her home and then shoot scenes inside of them that are kind of animated with voice acting by some pretty famous actors, actually. And it was a way of creating good footage and recreating her world because there's not really amazing documentary footage of her and her life. There's some great things that were made, but the quality of them is not excellent. And so, as you can see, this is like a whole vibe of Nellie Mae Rowe's life that they were able to conceive of. And the High now has some of these sets that they created in our permanent collection. They were part of our show, and they were part of this show when it was at the Brooklyn Museum, but they couldn't travel because they're made out of masking tape and cardboard. So it was a bit too complicated. But more about this interesting kind of intersection that happens with Judith, who's here as a doll, and Nellie, who's here as a doll. So again, I just kind of introduced you a bit to Judith as being this really important art dealer already on the scene in Atlanta. But when she meets Nellie, there's something new that happens. There's a new spark that grows into this friendship that lasts from, around 1978 to when Nellie passes in 1982. And then continues even after her death. And Judith felt really strongly about the legacy of Nellie's art, so she sold it to people when Nellie was alive, and she was able, to benefit obviously financially from it when she was alive. But then after she died, people kind of famously talked about how Judith wouldn't sell anything, because she just couldn't do it. And she just couldn't let go of this art to just random individual art collectors who passed through her gallery. It was too close. And what she ended up doing was when she was planning for her own kind of end of life, she gave the High almost 200 works of art. And that's how come we were able to do this show, and now we're sharing the wealth of our collection with institutions like the Hunter around the country. But that was Judith's plan, back to this idea of the plan, right? Was that Nellie should be remembered. She couldn't quite get the attention that she deserved in her own lifetime as a woman artist, as a black artist, as a Southern artist, as a self-taught artist, all marks against her, in an art world that really privileges the work of white men who come from formally, educated backgrounds. So this was really a way of ensuring that something like this could someday happen, right? That a big show, another book, all these things could someday happen. But Nellie did make it to New York, and that's what this is kind of scenes from. She did make it to New York, as was mentioned earlier. Judith had a lot of connections in New York and worked with another gallerist who she knew there to do a solo show for Nellie in 1979. And Judith was there taking pictures along with another Atlanta photographer, Lucinda Bunnan. And so these works kind of come from some of the pictures that were taken on this journey that Nellie then kind of repurposed into her art. This is her on the airplane, the first time that she had that experience, kind of zenning out to looking at, clouds, and I love how she put Mrs. Nellie Mae Rowe, on this one. Like she's going to New York, so it's Mrs. to you. And then down here, I love this one because I looked at this 1,000 times, and it has this amazing styrofoam frame, right, that she decorated. And I looked at this 1,000 times, and I always thought that they were looking at art in a gallery in New York, but actually they're in their hotel room arguing about what Nellie's wearing, because Judith brought Nellie like something to wear to this art opening, but Nellie brought her own clothes, and they didn't have the same style. And actually somebody said to me, I don't know if it was Cathi or Cheryl or who, but Judith did not dress like that. Like she did not wear those kinds of frilly dresses. She was more like into like caftans and like, I don't know, big loose clothing that was like a little bit, not feminine, not like traditionally feminine. And Nellie was not like Nellie was like gonna wear a pretty dress with like earrings like this, which I think she put those earrings there as a way to commemorate this moment. And so I guess when Judith went into the shower, Nellie like went and put on the clothes that she brought, and then they were still arguing about it when this picture was taken. And the text on it says, call on God. Sorry, and then it says, "Dear God, help us keep the peace." Where does it say that? Here, right here. Yeah. Call on God, and then, "Dear God, help us keep the peace." So anyway, just an interesting like revelations about that work. But that just goes to show that in their relationship, there was like this power dynamic they were both so powerful. Like it wasn't what I think a person would expect when they hear about like a black artist living in the South and a white art dealer and so on and so forth. It was like they were both forces of nature who had this kind of like, partnership and this friendship and this business partnership that was incredibly unique for its place and time. And it might be appropriate time. Judith, do you want to say anything about your cousin? And no. Okay. Yeah, that's all right. Okay, no worries. But this is Judith Augustine, who is among the people here representing the Judith Alexander Foundation, which is a foundation that's really dedicated to representing and ensuring the legacy of Judith, but also really Nellie Mae Rowe. And they've put so much work into making sure that people know about this incredible artist. Yes?
I did want to add one thing from that photograph of Nellie looking out the window on that trip. I think the thing that impressed her most of that whole trip was seeing the clouds from above, because she'd never been in an airplane. In fact, she'd never been out of the state of Georgia, this she told me, except once to Chattanooga.
Oh my gosh.
And here we
are. Yeah, that's amazing. Yes, and so I think as we close out, just to say that we end the exhibition with works that she made kind of late in life and were her kind of way of saying goodbye, because she was diagnosed with, she had a hard kind of series of things that happened to her in her final years. She had a car accident. She was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. But she did live long enough in 1982 to see also her work shown at the Corcoran Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. She couldn't go to that show, so she got to see the New York show. She wasn't well enough to travel to Washington, D.C. to see her art in this major exhibition. It was called Black Folk Art in America. It was the first major show of Black self-taught artists, mostly from the South, that this country had ever seen. It was hugely important. And she couldn't go, but she knew it was happening. She knew all the amazing press that it was getting, all the ways that people were saying this is one of the greatest American art traditions ever known. And she made all these beautiful drawings that say things like, I have a ride at last, sleepy girl. These were kind of her starting to say goodbye. And then the end of the show is really kind of, we always like to end the show with an image of her hand, right? Because she said this amazing thing, I'll read it. "The pictures I'm proud of that I've made are of my hand. I leave my hand on the wall. When I'm gone, they'll see a print of my hand. I love that, to see a print of my hand. I'll be gone to rest, but they'll look back and say, that is Nellie's hand." And again, this is this notion that even though she would say different things about her art practice. She would tell different people like, oh, I'm not an artist, or, so on and so forth. But she knew she was, and she knew that her art was going to be her legacy. And she left us all of these kind of, evidence of that. This is her talking about getting her wings to go to heaven.
I just wanted to say thank everybody for coming, or thank you everyone for coming. My mother's a little ornery sometimes. She just made 86 years old. Mom, where are you? She just made 86 years old, so she's the oldest. When you think about Aunt Nellie, and you think about saying that somebody would be 123 years old, that seems kind of crazy, right? Like, somebody, but that person would be 123 years old this year. So, like my cousin Ken said, we learned a lot about who we are. And so, this piece is the hand. And like she said, she always...
Yeah, that's
This is
good.
better?
Yeah, keep it a little farther away from your mouth.
I don't even have to have. Can I just speak without it?
I don't know. I can hold it for you.
Can you guys hear me without it? Oh, okay. So she always, the hand was her thing. I think I shake your hand, I hug you with my hands, I do a lot of things with my hands. So when I was in New York at the Brooklyn Museum and they were doing a PowerPoint, I saw her hand. And so then my little wheel started turning, so God gave me this. And it says, Black girls' hands create. Black girl, I've seen your hand 1,000 times, but this one instance, it ignited a fire in my mind to expound upon what and how you've created over time. Living clay propagates the elements she has refined, and she uses her phalanges to extrapolate the fragments of her mind, absorbing the nuances of Father Time and elevating it to reach the generation of this kind. The underlings of her past impregnated her with knowledge on what should and should not be, and directs her path on how to prosper and succeed. And now, this Black girl is able to create a legacy in a world filled with hypocrisy and deceit. Her light had been dimmed, her esteem shattered like glass. The system was designed to break her spirit, but God had it ironclad. The destiny of her future lies perfectly in her hands, managing her family and cultivating what's in God's plan. She often assumes the roles of mother, father, sister, brother, auntie, uncle, and friend, and her many roles are simply defined by the power that lies in her hands. She creates a space to create that is innate, that God Himself designed, creating something out of nothing that has always been her task, and most often it's divine. She can be dastardly and dirty, yet sophisticated and refined. She can create an atmosphere of brilliance to shape and mold children's minds. Black girl, there is nothing you cannot create with your hands. You lift them up to worship. You lift them up to praise. You use them to hug your children, and you use them to pray. You use your hands to caress and make love all through the night, and you even use those hands to fight. Equipped to fight for your rights, a warrior woman indeed. And when you open your mouth, Black girl, deep sultry sounds flows from your lips, and when you speak, it's like heaven filling the air with melodious notes of beauty, telling stories of how life weakened and strengthened you, and who you are loving and who's loving you. Black girl, you spew love for people each and every kind, and love has no limits, no barriers if it's authentically genuine. And don't be distracted by the color of her skin. A true Black girl can become a chameleon. So now let's just listen to this Black girl as she expresses herself to you. Laughter, that's what you do. You share your faith with any race, and you let them know God has them in the palm of his hand, covering and protecting them with his infinite wing, prohibiting the fiery darts of life's adversities. Black girl, what do you want to sing? Black girls create music that touches the subterranean hearts of her soul, awakening the spirit of her ancestral past as she feels the rhythm and moves to the beat in succinct and synchronizing fashion that really sets her free. Black girl, what do you want to be? An artist and artiste, you are indeed. You captured the vision that God gifted you and mastered it on canvas for the whole world to see. Black girl, this was your metamorphosis on becoming really free. Black girl, what do you want to do? Black girl, all the things you created with your hands and all the things you do is so you can live in your hands and be really, really free. All girls, what do you want to do? Play in your playhouse. Play in your playhouse and be free.
Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you again for the Hunter for taking this show, for doing such a beautiful job with it. Adira for organizing us all. Thank you. And yeah, I think we're all happy to take questions from anybody. And if there's any works that you want to have a conversation about, happy to do that. I know we didn't get to dive too deeply in different work. Yep.
I'm curious, did she get to reap any of the financial?
Yes. Yeah. She was selling. Judith was selling Nellie's work, while she was alive. Sorry, the question was whether she reaped financial benefits from, the success of her work. And she did when she was alive. And then I think I was saying earlier, Judith had a lot more trouble when she was deceased selling the work because she wasn't doing it to support Nellie anymore, and then it was hard to say goodbye to works that she felt that was all that she had left of her, right? And she knew, she knew that the art world, again, wasn't progressive enough at that time and inclusive enough to embrace Nellie Mae Rowe, and that the works would just kind of get scattered to the wind. So she waited until the early 2000s when the High did accept a gift of all of this work. But then it wasn't, until many years later that we actually did this show, obviously.
But then, so now, 2000, I'm sure her work, if it's for sale.
Yeah, there was work that sold yesterday and today at an auction in Georgia. I mean, yeah, it sells all the time.
How much does her work sell for now? I'm just curious.
It ranges, thousands, tens of thousands, it ranges a lot. Well, in the United States, we don't have artist resale rights for any artist. So when your art is up at auction, or if it's being sold by somebody who already bought the work from the artist, paid the artist doesn't get any more money, from a resale.
Deceased, but there's a legacy I heard somewhere, someone's doing a legacy. Never mind. Maybe I'm just asking too many. I'm crying.
No. I think the thing is just that there's an estate. So family gets proceeds, from But what I'm trying to explain is that for any artist in the United States, Europe is different. In Europe, an artist will get, like, as their work resells over time and like increases in value, they or their estate will continue to reap the benefits of that. In the US, we don't have those laws. So that's an unfortunate thing that you all can write to your Congress people about, and it affects all artists. And it's not, yeah. Anyway.
So the finance just goes to whoever selling the
Yeah, so if somebody brings something to auction, like yesterday, somebody was selling work at auction, just the person who's selling that work gets that money, you know what I mean? Because they already owned it, they already bought it at some point from a dealer, maybe from an artist, but yeah. It's the truth. Yeah. Sure, you seem like you want to.
Hi, everybody. I'm Helen Nels. I met Nellie Mae in 1968. And my friend Janet is here somewhere. She was with me. We would skip school. And on the way to the lake, we would stop at Nellie Mae's house. Because who wouldn't want to stop in that house? Look at that place. It was magic. And you can imagine, as born teenagers, it was just a thrill. It was a magical place. And her door was always open to any of us. So we started taking our babysitting money and going up to the Tuxedo Pharmacy, and then later to Binders, which was an art supply store in Atlantic Square, and bringing her stuff. And at that time, she was only drawing with number 2 pencils and, I guess, notebook paper from the kid who, I guess, one of the houses where she was working, and because she had not quite quit yet, retired. And we would just hang out with her in her living room while she's ironing and watching her stories. And 2 of my friends who were supposed to come today, who could not for medical things, they were art students. And so they showed her how you might work with pastels and watercolors, and we brought her that 128 colors of Crayolas. And she didn't have those before. So just as kids who were just being kids and we would say, well, she's just so neat, let's just see what she does with them. And then, we grow up and move on, and, and then all of a sudden, look at this. It's just surreal to see this. And I'm just so thrilled to have come to know you, Judith, and I did not I knew Lucinda, but I never got to see your photos, and I did not know your cousin Judith, because I put all this together much too late. But it's just thrilling to see how she expressed herself and what wayward teenagers might have helped to instigate with our time. So thank you for knowing that story.
I can add a funny story along.
Sure.
So my mom and Nellie and Judith. So Judith wanted my mom to, my mom's like the bashful Italian lady, so to get Nellie dressed up. So my mom goes out and buys whatever and brings it to Nellie before they go to New York. And Nellie's like trying it on, just like my mom describes it. As Nellie tries it on, she's like, honey, how am I going to get in this? Anyways.
Great. Well, are there any other questions or anybody? Don't be shy. Anybody else want to add anything? Well, I wanted to add one more thing that I didn't say before, but if you want to come out into this first gallery, this is a drawing that is another one where she would use, both images and text in her work, and what it is like a way of saying like, what's up, hello, like it's slang, so that's what she's saying here, but she used that phrase a lot in her drawing, and she would also say like, about her drawing, when people tried to ask her like what specific meaning, does this blue dog have, and this orange butterfly person and this green horse, like what does it mean, Nellie? And she would say, it is what it is, right? And that, so she's doing two things in that, right? She's saying, like, what's up? Hey, I'm here, right? Like, which we talked about before. That was what she was doing by making art, was she was putting herself out there. She was claiming this identity, showing that she could be a great artist. But she's also kind of enjoying, I think, hiding meaning from people, right? And letting the meaning kind of change and shift over time. She was also known to like tell different stories about the same piece. So she had a lot of power in that, right? Like in the way that she could create work that was so intriguing that people have so many questions, still have questions about what does this mean? What does this mean? And as an art historian and a curator, it's our job to try to figure it out and to make arguments for what different things mean. Like, we shouldn't stop doing that. But we also have to know that there's this element of mystery and this element of like, just like intellectual property, right? That she always kept for herself. And so that's something that I really love about her What It Is works. And she did that in there are at least 6 works where she wrote What It Is. And this one's especially great because it's her sitting in this chair and she's kind of like conjuring up this bird plant thing. There's this leg behind her, but it's a perfect self-portrait of that power, right? Of holding that power of creation, of imagination, of creativity, which is what she amazingly really held on to and then embodied in those last decades of her life.
That's made it look like it's almost on a canvas, too.
Yes, she liked something about that page. So he just observed that it almost looks like a canvas, like she liked this paper, right? She could have made it all like she did there. She could have covered up the texture, but she didn't. She liked that texture, right? That was a choice she made too. She did it on the tiled floors, like really nice, yeah. All right, and I think I'll end on that note unless anybody has anything else. Okay, thank you.